Hello, and welcome to What is Innovation, the podcast that explores the reality of a word that is in danger of losing its meaning altogether. This podcast is produced by Outlast Consulting, LLC, a boutique consultancy that helps companies use innovation principles to solve their toughest business problems. I'm your host, Jared Simmons, and I'm so excited to have Quinn Osha. Quinn Osha is the founder of Topmarq, an innovative online platform that allows car owners to get the best price for their used car. A car fanatic since he was young, Quinn saw room for disruption in the trillion-dollar automotive industry that would allow people to get better deals when selling cars. Despite starting with no co-founder and minimal funding, Quinn took Topmarq to revenue within 6 months, and the company now covers dealerships with a combined volume of over 1 million vehicles per month. Quinn, welcome to the show. So good to have you.
Thanks so much. Excited to be here.
Yeah. I love technology. I love cars. I should say I like cars because I know people who really love cars. I really like cars, and I'm really impressed and inspired by what you built. So I'm excited to dive in and get your thoughts.
Thanks. Yeah, I'm excited to talk about it. And I think the interesting thing about this business is that coming from a highly technical background, it's not necessarily a super innovative on the product or technical side. It's much more of an innovation in an industry vertical. And so I think it's actually quite an interesting use case or business case to talk about on this podcast. So yeah, happy to chat about it.
Yeah. Fantastic. Well, let's dive right in then. What is innovation?
Yeah, so I think a lot of people certainly have different impressions or understanding of what it is. I think if you polled the general public, they would tend to err on the side of like product innovation.
Mm-hmm.
So some kind of new technology is created, whether it's, the iPhone or the computer or something like sort of tangible and new.
Mm-hmm.
But ultimately, I think that what you actually see in reality is that that's the least common version of innovation. I view it in 4 verticals. So you've got product innovation, industry innovation, which is when you basically take something that works in one industry and apply it to a new industry. And that's what I would consider Topmarq as, is we took, this kayak search aggregation concept and applied it to a new industry. Then the third vertical is a marketing innovation. I think recently, podcasts have become very popular, and that's a relatively new innovation. You've got viral marketing, TikTok, stuff like that. Those are all kind of marketing innovations. And then the last one I view is business model innovation. So that's, what you saw over the last 10 years. When we used to pay one time for something, now we pay once a month for something. And that was truly quite an impressive and incredible innovation across almost all industries, from this like single pay system to a SaaS system. And I think that's kind of things that people tend to not think about in terms of innovation, but they can be equally powerful. And oftentimes the last 3 are much easier to get to market and much more profitable.
Yeah, I can imagine. I really like that you've got innovation kind of broken down into those buckets, and you sort of see yourself, or Topmarq, I should say, as sort of playing in that industry definition of innovation. Just from, kind of tooling around the website a bit, I would imagine the business model aspect of things is somewhat different from what's typical in your industry as well. How does your definition of innovation, especially around the industry, how has that informed kind of the way you think about building your business?
Yeah, it's kind of interesting and almost opposite to what you would expect. My background is electrical engineering, so hardware. I got an undergrad and a master's. So you would expect me to come out and kind of try to innovate on some hardware product.
Yeah.
And as much as I would love to do that, I love cars, I love autonomous technology, electric vehicles, all that stuff. The problem is that actually implementing that tends to require a whole bunch of money and a bunch of time.
Uh-huh.
And those are pretty much the 2 things that you don't have when you're starting a business.
Right.
Right. So you're just kind of shooting yourself in the foot if you do that. And I don't want to be too negative on it. Like, there are hardware companies that are, successful if you can raise a lot of money early, but you could probably count on your 2 hands the number of hardware startups that have been successful in the last 5 years. But it's impossible to count how many software startups have been successful. So clearly there's some kind of difference in how you apply those. And certainly not all those software companies are coming up with some like totally innovative new software concept, right? They're applying one of the three other versions of innovation. And so while I like to do product and research and stuff, I really had to force myself to stick inside of, the more approachable, bootstrappable versions. And so as I was looking at the automotive industry, it tends to lag pretty heavily the rest of the basically world.
Yeah.
And so that's an advantage to me, right? Because now I can take other learnings from other industries and apply them to the automotive, and it's, innovative, right? In terms of what the people in that industry see, it's a totally new product, which is really cool and really powerful.
Right.
And that's basically what we did is we saw that there are more and more car buying companies every day, but no real central location to really search, manage, and figure out which one's going to give you the best offer. And nobody wants to go around town trying to find who's going to pay the most for their car. And so having that kind of search engine-esque feature turned out to be, quite valuable to people.
Yeah. Fascinating.
And then, kind of along the way, like, I guess, we can get into this in more detail, but I think eventually a company starts by innovating in either the industry, marketing, or business model, typically. And then once they kind of figure that out, that's when they start really executing on the product innovation. And that's much more sort of, once you have the engineering team in place, you can start executing and iterating.
Is that something you see in Topmarq's future?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we're kind of already applying that. I think the base technology to sort of scrape, aggregate, and present offers was actually more complicated than we imagined initially.
I bet.
There was actually quite a bit of product innovation that went into that. There was a lot of software that we had to build and complexities that weren't obvious at the beginning. But it's cool now that we have that kind of fundamental product base because we get to do that iterative innovation process of, now we have a product that we know works. Where can we really make this smart? How can we make this more effective, faster, easier to use, stuff like that?
Sure. I hear a lot in what you're describing about you looking at ways to solve a problem and sort of reapplication across the industry. I don't hear you talking much about your own competitors and, here's what we did to differentiate and all those other things. It sounds like you were much more focused on a problem to solve and what's the most elegant and straightforward way to do that.
Yeah, I would say I have not spent a lot of time thinking about competitors.
Yeah.
Certainly, we've thought about it within the scope of, are they solving this problem we're trying to solve?
Right.
Yeah, and like you mentioned, like if they're doing that, how are we either going to do that differently or if it's worth doing something? But no, I'd say we probably don't do that as much, which is interesting because, most people would say, oh, the automotive space is so crowded. There's so many people in it and, it's just not worth it. But, there's so many examples of companies that have come into very crowded spaces and done very, very well by basically innovating in one of those three verticals that I mentioned.
Sure.
The book Blue Oceans gives a great example of like the story of Yellowtail, an Australian wine brand that theoretically one of the most crowded spaces, hard to differentiate, difficult to distribute. And they basically innovated on their marketing and their business model. And now they're one of the most successful wine brands in history. So I think looking at competition too much in a space can really be detrimental to innovating, if you see an opportunity.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I think the whole benchmarking, and disruption focus, I feel like that has gotten sort of overplayed lately in terms of people trying to disrupt an industry versus trying to solve a problem. And if you solve a unique problem, you will disrupt the industry. I think it's really great to hear you talk about being so focused on the problem and kind of allowing things to work themselves out. It's not a crowded market when you're the only person that's identified. When you identify a unique problem, it's a market of one, because you're the only person trying to solve that.
Yeah, exactly. And I would just like to add that like time is always a very important factor in the ability to innovate. I think even in product innovation, like if people came out with, quantum computers before there was like the network to facilitate them, nobody would have heard of them because they would have died in infancy, right? And so, there could be some philosophical argument of like, if you invent something in the forest, but nobody sees it, is that really innovation?
Hmm.
And so time becomes a really massive component. And that's something we're definitely leveraging because, for better or worse, the pandemic has pushed a lot of these car dealers online. And suddenly there's a lot of digitalization of vehicle sales. And so we can take advantage of that and aggregate it.
Right.
And, we're doing something now that we couldn't have done 5 years ago. It was physically impossible. So it definitely can't ignore the importance of sort of the timing of your innovation as well.
Yeah, no, that's a great add. And I think that, sort of being job focused allows you to be able to react to opportunities as they come up because it's not something you can control, but it's something that when it presents itself, you're either ready to take advantage of it or you aren't, right? I mean, there's the pandemic affected everyone, it affected every industry, every business on the planet. The question is, do you understand the problem that you're trying to solve well enough to see how this new world, this new way of working, this new reality affects it? And that's what we're all trying to figure out. And I think to your point, timing is and these sort of complementary goods almost, if I can use that term, like, the fact that the internet was born, you couldn't have chat rooms, you couldn't have social media, you couldn't have all these other things if the internet hadn't come into existence.
Sure.
The Cold War and a lot of the elements around, the being prepared for potential attack from the Russians shaped the internet. It's, distributed because you don't want everything centralized in one place in case of attack. So you're right, the world we live in shapes our technology and our opportunities and how we can take advantage of those things. So your role as an aggregator, do you think that gives you a different view of the industry than say Carvana or General Motors or someone else? Can you talk to me about a bit about that?
Yeah, I think we just fundamentally view what we do differently,
Hmm.
even though we're very close in the space. But the more people I talk to in the industry, there's just kind of this sort of legacy view of just you do it the normal way, right? You
Hmm.
just do it the way where you're either a dealer or potentially a wholesaler, and you buy a vehicle directly from a consumer from some sort of direct ad campaign or whatever funnel that they have, and then you buy it and then you resell it or whatnot. And we just sort of look at it from the customer perspective, which is like we don't care about any of that. What we
Hmm.
care about is finding a dealer that is going to pay us the most, and if not the most, have the best overall deal when we buy another car, right?
Mm.
With tax incentives and whatnot, or if they have a specific car that you want.
Right.
We just come from it from the opposite perspective, and sure, we're trying to help dealers, and we make the funnels more effective, and we provide a lot of value add to them as well.
Yeah.
That's not where we start. We start with the user experience. And from my experience, that's really not something people have done thus far. And I think it takes us a long way.
Yeah.
So that's definitely been good. I think we also apply, even though I mentioned we kind of try to stay away from heavy research projects, that doesn't mean we don't use complicated tech or, bleeding edge tech, right?
Sure.
You can apply brand new technology quite effectively and quite quickly these days because all you need to do is go and find a repository that's already doing it, or there's lots of ways to take advantage of the innovations of others in a
Hmm.
legal and moral way.
Yeah, I know exactly what you mean.
And
Yep.
it's
Yep.
incredible. I mean, the amount of power that you have at your fingertips,
Hmm.
and it's really cool. So we're kind of applying my background of a heavy research hardware tech company
Sure.
into this automotive space that, to be totally honest, has not really spent a lot of time anything like overly technical from what I've personally experienced. And
Sure.
I haven't seen beneath everybody's skirts or whatnot in the industry. But
Right.
even when they say, oh, we're using like millions of data points to estimate this price, that's like saying you kind of opened an Excel sheet with like 5,000 lines and
Hmm.
did some analysis. That's not that technical these days. There's a lot more that you can do with machine learning, image processing for, vehicle analysis and stuff that nobody's really doing. And I think we can apply quite quickly and add a lot of value.
Mm. Yeah, I can imagine that would be a space where those sorts of technologies, you could really get out in front in leveraging those. I love your definition of innovation in the four areas: product, industry, marketing, business model. What in your mind isn't innovation?
Interesting question.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I'm more of a just a pro innovation thinker. I
Hmm.
would consider almost anything where you make an effort to do something better than it was before an innovation,
Mm.
especially because of my view on product innovation
Yeah.
is very much iterative.
Hmm.
Working at, again, a software company previously where one of the products was this machine vision license plate recognition thing, but it was essentially an application of other machine learning algorithms that other people had done and then bringing in new data and making it slightly better and slightly better. And then when the product itself was released, it was incredibly innovative within the space, but the technology was so iterative over time
Hmm.
that to me being inside it felt not as immediate, right? It wasn't a big jump, it was that iterative jump. So in
Sure.
general, I would say, like, as long as you're not just okay with doing the exact same thing over and over again,
Yeah.
to some degree you actually are innovating.
Yeah. Progress, some sort of forward motion.
Yeah.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. One of the things talked about in a previous episode and comes up fairly frequently is innovation is not invention. And I hear that a lot in what you're saying now, in that you don't have to invent something new. You don't have to create something from scratch for it to be innovative. You can take basic technologies and reapply them across industries, or take what's already there and reframe the business model. And that is an innovative thing. And I think that is a super important message to sort of get out in front of folks, because when someone goes to your website and sees what you've built and the cool stuff that it's able to do and the unique problem that it solves, it's probably easy for someone to think, oh, he must have had this mountaintop experience and this brilliant idea that he had got 15 patents for and all this stuff before he started doing this. But it doesn't sound like that was your journey.
No, definitely not. I mean, we are working on patents now, but
Yeah, yeah.
to keep me honest in the future, I wish maybe that was it, that there was this some eureka moment where I
Yeah.
realized I was a genius and everything was going to work out. But, if anything, it was the opposite.
Yeah.
I felt
Yeah.
like an idiot all the way along the way until,
Yeah.
oh, suddenly it worked. So no, it was definitely in the same way iterative for me.
Hmm.
We just took it step by step and pushed where we were capable of going. And each time we kind of laid a brick, we were like, oh, well, we can lay this sort of next brick and sort of build the house that way. And that's been honestly one of the coolest things for me to see as a first time entrepreneur, is just how far you can get if you just start, doing something. Like
Right.
you said, progress. Sort of one of my favorite sayings is progress, not perfection. Do
Hmm.
something and see where you can go.
Yeah. That's so important. And I wonder, you're an electrical engineer. I'm a chemical engineer.
Oh, cool.
I never engineered a chemical,
Uh,
but but I have the degree. So I went right into research and development and did all kinds of other things. But I do think there's something in that training, the engineering training, whether you're learning circuits or flow processes or whatever, just the methodical, process driven mindset of try this and learn, and then try this other thing based on what you learned and learn from that. That really sticks out when I talk to an engineer who's an entrepreneur. You don't, for me anyway, I never saw it as, okay, I got to build this perfect thing from the beginning. This is what makes sense right now. We'll try that, and it'll either work or it won't. But either way, I'll know better what should happen next.
Yeah, and I think that's a really powerful thing. And that's interesting that, yeah, that you sort of see it there as well, because I was just talking to somebody else about how, yeah, at Caltech, their method of work was basically to give you problem sets that were what they viewed as too difficult for you to do on your own.
Hmm.
And then they allowed people to work together in, teams and whatnot, even on the tests and stuff.
Oh wow, that's cool.
And it's, it makes it sound like it was easy, but it actually, just allowed them to make harder questions. But it
Yep.
does, like you said, it gives you that ability to come up against something that looks impassable and then just sort of break it down bit by bit.
Mhm.
It's probably an engineering thing because it's a sort of technical process. So I could see that being consistent across most engineering degrees.
Yeah, yeah. I think so. It's just the fact that you're You're almost by nature inventing. Every time you're building something new or revising a process, you're kind of creating a new outcome.
Yeah. And just like super effective problem solving. I think one thing I'd like to mention, it's really easy to get sucked into the technology.
Hmm.
And so something that I did pretty purposefully and I think was very powerful is I didn't stay, and it sounds like you didn't either. I didn't stay in electrical engineering. I did a year and a half there. Then I did some project management for hardware software products. Then I jumped across the vertical into enterprise sales,
Mm.
purposefully just to see different parts of the business.
Yep.
And I think if you put yourself in these positions where you see, different marketing channels, different marketing types, you see different business models, you see different industries, then you can kind of see them and point to them and say, oh, what if I put these three together? And that's where you can really become quite powerful at innovating, because you're just sort of like looking at a map of things you've seen and then reapplying them.
Oh, yeah. That's very well said. I love people who've made those sort of random walks through careers because it really it gives you that perspective you're describing it. It allows you to see things as problems to be solved, you know? And that's what you spend years in engineering school learning is how to solve problems. But if you stay in engineering, you think all problems are engineering problems.
Exactly.
But
Yep.
then when you get into sales or you get into marketing, or, I spent time in market research and consulting and other management consulting and other things.
Okay, so you've done sort of the same thing.
Yeah, yeah, you and I, yes, yes. I think we're kindred spirits, you and me. I think when you do that, what you do is you learn that chemicals or circuits are just another form of a problem. Like there's an analog to that for sales or finance or accounting, and it allows you to talk to people and connect with people in a problem solving way where you just kind of like, okay, well, I just need to learn the equivalent, you know,
Hmm.
what's your word for this?
Yeah.
What's your concept for this?
Hmm.
And then we're off and running.
Yeah.
But if when you stay in your domain, it's hard to get that language, that kind of sort of ability to translate.
Yeah, that's interesting. I definitely felt from engineering to project management, it was kind of the same org. So you
Hmm.
could kind of, the analogs were closer.
Yep.
But it was a really big shock going to sales, because in the engineering org, everybody had gripes about salespeople. They did
Yep.
this, they do that, blah, blah, blah. And then you go to the sales org, and then suddenly it's the exact opposite. Oh, the engineering org, they're late, they're, not building the right products, blah, blah, blah. It was just so interesting to like pull the curtain and be like, oh, whoa, like neither side is right.
Right.
There are reasons for both sides doing what they are, and neither side understands them,
Yep.
which is, I don't know, something to be learned, I guess, for the organization I was in, but definitely eye opening for me.
Yeah, it's not uncommon. I always say innovation gets stymied by four words, in big organizations. It's they don't get it. And that's when you stop talking and communicating and collaborating. It's like, okay, well, yeah, the sales folks, they don't get it. The engineers, they don't get it. And you're right. Everybody's looking at the same thing just from different perspectives. And organization structures often reinforce those different views with incentives. Okay, well, the salespeople will be rewarded and incentivized this way, and the R&D people will be rewarded and incentivized this way. Like, so if I'm in R&D, I'm thinking about patents. If I'm in sales, I'm thinking about top line. And never the twain shall meet, so to speak.
Hmm.
But yeah, I really love the fact that I didn't realize this, that Caltech is so collaborative, drives so much collaboration even in the test taking, because that's what the world is now. And I'm sure you can attest to, even as an entrepreneur, it's really about collaborating and being able to connect with people.
Yeah, no, definitely. I mean, if you can't talk to people in a language they understand, you're in a lot of trouble, especially from my perspective as a solo founder. I have to talk to the engineering team on a deeply technical level, and I also have to be able to talk very surface level value prop, marketing channels to our sales, side. So
Mm.
being able to understand empathetically, how people feel in a certain situation is incredibly powerful.
Yeah. Yeah. Tell me more about Topmarq. Tell me about it today. It's really helpful to have heard about your background, the way you view things. I'd love to know more about Topmarq as it is today.
It's a platform. The long term vision is it's the first place you go when you decide you need to sell your car. whether you end up, selling through our portal or not. I want it to be the first place you go to get a good price and to get a good idea of your options. In the same way, if, I'm flying to New York, which I'm doing on Sunday, the first thing I did, I went to Kayak to try to find different hotels in the area. That's really the goal. And I think most people can sort of understand that. There's a lot of things that we can do down the line in terms of really quickly getting that value, because you do have to put in some information about your car, like the mileage, whether they're dents and stuff.
Sure.
The goal is to be able to do that just with a simple app and take some quick photos. We're not quite there yet, but it only takes about 2 minutes. You get cash offers and it's a very simple process. And then we connect you with dealers that they want to buy it. Wow. Yeah, I mean, there's some complications on the dealer back end. A lot of stuff there that kind of gets into the nitty gritty, but I don't know, the average person probably isn't overly interested in what happens to their car after they sell it.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. But it's quite complicated, but it's gone and you get your cash basically. So
yeah, that's the job you're doing, right? That's the problem you're solving, making it easy for people to sell their cars. So that's really cool. Kayak is a good example. I know I use Google Flights a lot.
Love Google Flights.
Yep. Those are both buy side, like I'm buying. I don't know of a lot. You're on the sell side.
Yeah, we are on the sell side.
Yeah.
That's where we get into some of the intellectual property that we're discussing and, because it is actually quite unusual.
Yeah. Yeah. I was trying to think of it when I was going through the site. I was like, this feels really different. And I couldn't quite put my finger on it. And that's when it hit me. It's like, oh, any other time I'm using a site like this, I'm trying to buy something. Very, very novel, very interesting. How do you think about what's next? I know you've got a roadmap in your head. I can tell. I'm sure it's on a whiteboard.
Definitely on a whiteboard.
You and I bonded over whiteboards. Yeah. How do you think about what's next for Topmarq?
We're actually joining. We're not supposed to announce. So we're in a program.
Yeah.
For the next 4 months,
sure.
Which I'm really excited to do. Involves a lot of mentorship with some previous, founder exits, investment, stuff like that. But really 2022 is just sort of pedal to the metal. We're going to start hiring almost immediately and just sort of really hope to grow the team, grow the product, expand as quickly as possible while, evolving the product. The cool part for me is getting the business model and the marketing channels far enough to a point where then we get to start playing with this product innovation. And that's, to me, kind of the really fun stuff, right?
Yeah.
That's when you get to start mingling in the technology and pushing the bounds and, throwing stuff on the wall.
Yep.
And so I'm really excited for that aspect.
Yeah, it does kind of unlock that sort of time and mind share to be able to do things like that.
I think like the technologist in me, wanted to do that at the beginning, but that's where you run into all these businesses that build a product that nobody wants or that builds really cool technology that nobody needs.
Right.
And so you really have to like turn that part of you off until you get to a point where, okay, now there's like this money funnel and we're able to sustain it. And now we get to do the fun stuff.
Vegetables before dessert.
There you go. Yeah, that's a good phrase. I'm going to steal that if that's okay.
It's all yours. Before I let you go, I do want to ask you if there's any advice you have for innovators out there who are, kind of looking at what you did and want some advice.
Sure. I think the first one is that it's really easy to look at where you get and not see the path. There was no eureka moment. There was no like genius like night of coding that solved some magic problem. It has just been 18 months of grinding against the wall in building bit by bit. So don't be afraid to start if you think you can't do it, because as of 18 months ago, I was in enterprise sales. I had never written a production line of code in my life. So you can get pretty far in a short amount of time. And again, I just really nailed down the progress, not perfection. Just start doing it if you want to do it and then figure out things on the way.
Fantastic advice. Quinn Osha, fellow entrepreneur, fellow engineer, fellow whiteboard lover. It's been great connecting with you and learning from you about innovation. Thank you for making the time to chat with us and sharing your advice.
Yeah, no worries. Thanks for having me. I always love talking about tech, and this has been really cool. So thanks for having me.
All right. Take care. We'd love to hear your thoughts about this week's show. You can drop us a line on Twitter at Outlast LLC, OUTLAST LLC, or follow us on LinkedIn where we're Outlast Consulting. Until next time, keep innovating, whatever that means.